So I want to interject there because there have been actually 3 sero surveys that have been done in 3 major cities, Delhi, Mumbai and Pune. And actually the results are startling, and I wish there was clearer official communication on this, because the sero survey tells you that 1 in every 3 people in the city of Delhi, where I am today, are seropositive. 60% nearly of people in Mumbai slums are seropositive, and nearly half of Pune is seropositive. So what that is explaining to us, Dr. Fahim, is the fact that many more people have tested positive, but fewer people are dying from it. The IFR, the infection fatality rate, is much lower. So is this virus not as fatal as we had feared?
Great question, great point. So once again, remember what I said was, if you take India as a whole, I'm aware of those studies, but what if you went to Gurdaspur and you did sero studies? What will be that number? If you went to Agra? By the way, Delhi, even the moment you say Mirza Ghalib's Shahar, so I still bhi Urdu mein sochta hu, English mein bolta hu. So one day I wish I could come to Delhi. It's a beautiful.
I hope you can. I hope you can. But carry on. Yes.
Yeah, but going back to your point, so I personally think herd immunity is anything around 50-ish, 60-ish% for this virus. Again, it's a complex phenomena, depends on many, many different factors. But my hunch once again is, if you looked at every person living in India, that number will be lower. And why that is important? Because this virus is going to continue to find new homes. Once it depletes Pune, you don't want it to go 100 miles away and start all over again, right? It's like fire in the forest. That's number one. Your second question about IFR and what's the fatality rate, I think that's a very good question. And it can be misleading. So let me tell you, that's good news for individuals, bad news for countries. Why? At present, we believe the fatality rate is about 0.5%. It could even be lower in countries like India, Pakistan, where there's younger populations. Now, for an individual, that's very good news. If you're under the age of 50 and you don't have diabetes, obesity, cancer, heart disease, all those comorbidities, your chance of survival is very high. I don't say this so you become complacent. No, you should. Sure. You should remain careful. But when you're looking at a country like India, when you're looking at large numbers, 0.5% can be a very large number. Let's look at it this way. God forbid, less than 10% of India, for easy math, 100 million people got the infection. You know what the 0.5% will be? 500,000, right? That's the death toll we're talking about. And don't forget about 3 to 5% hospitalization. Do you have enough hospital capacity for 5 million people? And the other unknown is we still don't know the chronic effects of this disease. There may be some people, now, again, we don't know how many, some who may not recover in 2 weeks and may take much longer.
So I do have questions on the long COVID phenomenon, but I still want to push you a little bit more on this fatality rate. Now, from data in India, we know that 3,000 people in India die every day from tuberculosis, and another 3,000 die from cancer. What nobody has done, and I don't know if these comparative studies have been done in the United States either, has been to tell people that more people are dying from COVID on a daily basis than from other infectious diseases. Can you clear the air on this? Because in India, while the sero surveys actually tell you that many more people have already got this virus than the official numbers tell us, and that's possibly good news, I'm still holding on to this good news because I'm still hopeful that this means fewer people are dying from this than we initially feared. I get what you're saying about even a small fatality rate is a very big number in a country with a big population. But how does this compare with other diseases, other possibly fatal diseases?
So this is a great question. And there's a reason I've always said we need to stay between the extremes of panic and denial. We need to stay in the middle. There's a reason it's not happening coincidentally that if you're on my Twitter, I don't talk about policy. I don't talk about lockdowns. I don't talk about what governments should do because of the exact same reason. When you understand the complexity of this thing, every government has a very difficult challenge at their hand. Every government. And we should empathize with them. We should not it's very easy to criticize a government, but nobody would want to be in that hot seat today. And that is precisely for the reason you mentioned. What is the mental disease impact? What's happening to our mental health with lockdowns? What's going to happen the economy. How many people will die of heart disease at home and they will not go to a hospital because they're afraid? And those studies are published. Actually, the amount of time someone took in Hong Kong to call ambulance went 3 to 4 times during an outbreak because they were afraid. So you're right. I think there are competing factors here.
Yeah.
But the reality is this pandemic, when something dominates the news media, it generates anxiety, it takes so much international attention. It just has a truth of its own. And I think the good thing about COVID is we are going to win this within a year, 2 years, 6 months, whatever that time period is. And tuberculosis, unfortunately, will still be around. So this is still a transient thing. If we put aggressive measures around it, I think it'll help the economy move on faster.
But would you say that the data tells you that this is more fatal as a percentage of population than other infectious diseases?
Again, it will vary. It will vary in different parts of the country and different public health infrastructure. And it's very hard to compare one with the other because, as I said, there are just so many variations.